When I was 14, I remember going to birthday parties all the time. I remember a specific party in late October. I was making my way to throw my food away when I heard, "Hey, what's your name?" I turned around, and there stood a small girl with a huge smile on her face. Before I could tell her my name, she blurted out, "My name is Janelle Camara," and then a crowd of girls congregated behind her as if she had her own personal army. Being the young kid I was, I got overwhelmed by the amount of girls in front of me. I was trying to think of what to say as they all stared at me. Before I could get anything out, Nellie kept talking, and then all I said was, "Isaiah," as I ran back to my friends. I told my friends about the interaction with Nellie. Little did I know, apparently everyone knew Nellie. Nellie was famous. Little did I know, she would soon become my best friend. The early stages of our friendship involved phone calls until the sun came up and an automatic text message every time I looked at my phone. Nellie and I's friendship was special, and we both knew it immediately. I had never trusted someone, even in my own family, as much as I trusted Nellie. We soon began considering each other brother and sister. Never was there a time where Nellie and I had nothing to talk about. As we got older, we only became closer. Anytime someone had a problem with me, no matter who they were, they had a problem with Nellie too. My friends started making fun of me, asking me where my bodyguard was whenever she wasn't around. Nellie made me a better person every time we were together by showing me how important it is to be loyal to the ones you love. 3 years after becoming friends, everything changed. Nellie was diagnosed with a unique version of bone marrow cancer in her spine. The day she found out, I stayed with her in the hospital that night. My mind was in a place where it had never been before. For the first time since I could remember, I wasn't sad and I wasn't mad, but I was scared out of my mind. I felt like I was disappointing her due to the lack of things I knew to say. She must have sensed this, because as she was released from the hospital the next day and I walked her to her mom's car, she looked at me and said, "Don't be scared, Zeke. I got this." At that moment, I had no doubt in my mind that she was going to win her fight. As things were changing in her life, things were changing in mine as well. As sudden death, drug addiction within my family, and Nellie's disease entered my life all at once, I became lost within my own thoughts. I stopped caring, eating as much, and sleep was a nightly struggle to the point where I would dread the thought of even trying. These battles with sleep turned into phone calls with Nellie. As I questioned every aspect of my life, our friendship never changed. No matter how bad she felt on any given day, she would always ask me how I was doing, which was much more important to her than anything about herself. After making my decision to attend Brooks, Nellie was going into her first surgery. It was thought to be a success. Nellie was able to return to cheerleading in the fall for the football team. She loved being a cheerleader, mainly because she was always the loudest person wherever she was, and also because she loved to dance, especially with me. Everyone who was close with her believed that she was a survivor, and her fight was over. I was fortunate enough to make it to the first football game of the season. The minute Nellie saw me, she screamed into the bleachers, "I'm back, Zeke." Even though any reply I could have had would have been drowned out by the laughter around me, I realized that I was back too. It became clear to me that Nellie was a part of me, that Nellie was a part of me and I was a part of her. I was sure that Nellie would always be my rock. She made me feel strong, and everything seemed to get better in the next few months. Now, when I say everything got better, I'm mainly talking about the things that were important to me. I was doing well in school, playing well in basketball, and the issues in my life were getting better finally. Things seemed as if they were starting to go back to normal. Though I had other ongoing issues in my life, Nellie's health was always on my mind the most. All I remember thinking was that I couldn't lose her. I was so dependent on her that I couldn't imagine not having her in my life. Anytime something was wrong, she would know. I thought about Nellie every night, and the more I thought about her, the harder it became. On the day Nellie's treatments were complete, we all believed that the disease was behind us. I wasn't the same, though. I wasn't scared of what was going to come next anymore. I wasn't scared, and I rarely ever even thought about the future. I began living in the moment and realizing how important the things right in front of me actually were. I showed more love to the people that I cared about and worried less about anything else. This feeling of strength didn't last very long. As I received devastating news in the middle of the summer, but my friend Anna passing, my life slowly began to fall apart. My parents were done trying to help my brother with his addiction, and Nellie began feeling sick again. Nellie got informed that her tumor was back, and she would need to have another surgery, along with beginning chemotherapy immediately. I remember how sad she looked when I walked into the dark hospital room. She was all alone, and I don't even know if she knew I was there. For the first time since I knew her, she looked weak. She was hooked up to a lot of machines and had wires coming out of her every which way. Once I made my way into the room, Nellie looked different to me. She wasn't herself. She was still in a lot of pain from the surgery and reminded me hundreds of times over the next few days how much she didn't want for the hospital to shave her head as part of her treatment. Nellie then went to a barber the day before she would have had it shaved at the hospital and got a cancer ribbon designed into her head. When I asked her why she did it, she told me that if it was going to be the last time she had her hair, then she would want to do something fun with it. I was amazed at her ability to find light in such a dark situation. As her treatment continued, Nellie got worse and worse. She began to shut down and grow weaker. As I went to say my goodbyes before I left for school one weekend, as I always did, she looked at me and said, "I'm not myself anymore, Zeke, and my time is coming." I immediately got upset with her and told her never to speak like that. That thought that Nellie could never be gone and that everything was going to be okay, that thought wasn't there anymore. Now she was fighting harder than she ever had, and her chance of victory was slim to none. On a Friday night, I received a call from her mom. She was so devastated on the phone that it was hard to understand what she was telling me. After a minute of misunderstanding what she was telling me, she said, "Zeke, you need to come home." The doctor informed us that Nellie only has less than a week to live. Even though I knew this was coming, I was nowhere near prepared for it. The days prior to this night were all signs of this. She wasn't answering any of my calls, and she wasn't answering any texts either, due to her being unresponsive. The chemo was supposed to help, but instead, it caused the cancer to spread to her brain. Her face became swollen, she lost her ability to walk, and everyone who loved her was scared of what was about to happen. I didn't want to be at school at all. If it wasn't for the people here at Brooks, along with the love of my parents, I don't know what I would have done. I was completely lost all over again. On Sunday night, my phone rang, and it was her. Her voice was to a whisper. "Zeke, the time has come." As I could hear the pain in her voice, I broke down. Before I could say anything, she explained to me that I needed to be there for everyone once it happens. She told me that I had to be just as strong as I always was for her, for everyone now. We didn't hang up the phone that night. We talked some, but mostly just sat on opposite ends of the call in silence. I woke up for class the next morning, and Nellie was still on the call. I didn't know if she was awake or not, so I spoke softly and said, "I love you, Nellie." Before I could hang up, she whispered back, "I love you too." That day was tough for me. I had to take 2 finals and play in a soccer game the following day before I could get home. I didn't want anything to do with anyone else besides Nellie. Nellie needed me, and I couldn't be there. All day I texted her but got no responses still. I called her and got nothing. When night came, I began receiving texts from everyone at home saying that tonight may be the night. What could I do? All of our friends were there by her side, except for me. Nellie made it through the night, but her time was now set for any minute. I played in my game that day and rushed home as quickly as possible. As I got off the elevator, all of my fear was at the front of my mind. Once I saw how many people were there for Nellie, I froze. I stood outside the door for about 5 minutes without saying a word. Once I came to, I looked around, and everyone was behind me. "You're the only one she's asked for, Zeke," her mom kept telling me. And at that point, I wiped away my tears and went into the room. As everyone gathered around her, I laid down. She wasn't saying anything. She wasn't moving. And as I laid there, I held her. I wasn't thinking of life without her anymore, and I wasn't scared. I just wanted her to know how much I loved her. Nellie's mom asked for everyone except for myself and Nellie to leave the room. She kept telling me, "Tell her you love her, Zeke." As I started to tell her, I broke down worse than I ever had in my life. I whispered to her over and over again that I love her. As I held her hand, I felt a clinch. She started to make some quiet noises, and her mom asked her to say it louder. She went mute for about a minute, but when I felt another clinch, her eyes opened slightly. She looked me in my face and said, "I love you too, Zeke." My heart stopped. Because Nellie hadn't said anything in about a day, her mom brought her family in to make sure they all heard her voice one last time. As I made my way to the door, I realized I was still crying. When I stepped into her bathroom, I looked in the mirror and tried to get myself together. I had to be strong for Nellie, is all I kept telling myself. As I left the hospital that day, I went home to devastation. All of my friends came together that night. And waited the call that we all knew was coming. As my phone rang at around 11:30 that night, it was Nellie's mom. She said, "Zeke, she isn't hurting anymore, and she is going to watch over all of us." She told me that she wanted her friends to hear it from me, and that I needed to let them know. It took no words for everyone to know exactly what just happened. What would I do when something went wrong? Who would I call if Nellie wasn't there anymore? I felt emptiness in myself to the point where I began to question everything. When we gathered to carry Nellie out to the transport vehicle during her funeral, I had no words. I stared at the casket the whole way, hoping that I was going to wake up from some type of nightmare. Hoping that I would wake up and Nellie would be there again dancing and back to her old self. As we traveled to the church for her service, we needed to go through the next town over, known as Somerset. From the second we crossed the bridge, something amazing happened. Yellow balloons and ribbons for Nellie in honor of her cancer foundation, or her personal foundation, were lining the streets for miles. It made it very clear the impact that Nellie had in her short life. As time passed, I realized all the things Nellie did for me. She taught me how to fight, how to love, and how to be selfless even in the most inconvenient of circumstances. Nellie didn't used to be my best friend. She still is my best friend. And I know that her beautiful spirit will guide me through the rest of my life, and one day we will dance again. And now, Nellie, I got this. Thank you.